confessed and did to a certain degree, but he was more into the act of reconciliation than he was into the act of penance. So about the time of what they called the period of scholasticism, which was kind of around that time of Thomas Aquinas, it was more of a, let's define sin a lot closer, let's get down to the nitty-gritty, inquiring minds want to know, that kind of a thing. You know, how far can I push the limit and not step over the line?
Sometimes when I go to reconciliation, I really feel good about myself. When I come out, I feel that, you know, I'm right with God, if you want to put it that way. Other times, I just went recently, a couple of weeks ago, or whatever, and it wasn't as fulfilling as I was searching for when I confessed to the priest. He didn't make, well, it was the current situation with our, you know, our pedophile priest, whatever, you know, I didn't get the kind of, I guess, answer or words to help me through this, and so, you know, I did not have a good confession, I guess, so, but I told the priest then, I said, you know, even though I'm not satisfied, I'm going to receive communion if that's okay with you, because I think I need Jesus as close to me as I can. And he said, okay. So, you know, I still receive it.
Part of that issue may be that you were seeing not a break with God, but a break with people. A lot of people that are having issues right now with the priests and the bishops and everything else because of the crisis that's going on in the church have their anger directed towards the people, and they want to have some kind of reconciliation with them instead of understanding that the sacrament of confession or reconciliation is to give you a reconciliation with God. Okay? And a sense of what we call metanoia or conversion. Which brings me to the next piece. So, you guys have seen me do this before. What is reconciliation?
Sacrament.
It's a sacrament. When you put RE before any word, what does it mean?
Again.
To do it again, right? When you put TION at the end of a word, what does it mean?
Action.
Action, right? Sure. Con,
With.
with, like con queso, one of my favorites.
We're getting with cilia, which is like hair-like.
It is.
A feeler, it is.
In Greek, this is actually the word for eyelash.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Little tiny hairs that end in a nerve ending.
Yeah.
And if you touch somebody's eyelash, what do? They blink, they close their eyes, right? Because it's so close to that nerve ending. But it's a little tiny hair. The Greeks call it an eyelash. So when you think of reconciliation, reconciliation is the act of, once again, being eyelash to eyelash with God. So reconciliation, the sacrament of reconciliation, is to bring you back into this face-to-face with God, this closeness.
Yeah, I probably got the oldest dictionary that was ever printed, but I looked it up Friday or Saturday, reconciliation, and it said restoring peace and harmony or communion, and that was all it said. And I thought that's really neat.
That's a beautiful definition.
Yeah, I thought restoring peace and harmony or communion. I just thought that was so beautiful.
Yeah. This whole idea of being face-to-face or being close to, once again, to be restored. That's the idea of reconciliation. And that's what ended up coming about starting after this period where the monks began to privately confess and to
build on these prayers of absolution, not make it such a severe act that you could only do once in your life, but however often you wanted to, or should do, to restore a relationship. And then deal with these things in a different way, this punishment for the sin. Okay? So the focus of this sacrament is on restoration, or, as Father Randy Stice says, healing. It's an act of healing, not an act of bringing down the hammer. Although sometimes healing means we have to get something cut apart, right? To be healed sometimes takes severe measures. If the illness is really severe, more severe the treatment sometimes. We see things like cancers have to be cut out or have to be radiated or chemoed or whatever. And that's a pretty severe reaction or a pretty severe action to get rid of something that's very severe. It's going to kill you, this idea of mortal sin. But sometimes you go to the doctor and he gives you just an antibiotic or a Z-Pack, or whatever they call it, and 5 or 6 days later you feel wonderful all over again. That's another type of restoration, right? But it's for something else that's minor. So, penance, what you do, depends on what you've done and how ruptured that relationship with God is at the moment, and how you get rid of the eternal punishment of sin might take a little bit more than what you think. The temporal goes away immediately when you go to confession, the immediate punishment. But the eternal takes a little bit more, so you might have to do some more stuff to limit your time in purgatory. I did a class on purgatory a couple of years ago, I think. And we'll, if I need to do that again, we'll schedule it at some point. But purgatory is not always what you think it is.
Yeah. I think that was one of your classes that we could have spent weeks on.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites, but it takes a long time. Questions, thoughts about this?
So when you go to confess, let's say a murderer, you know, with confession, he has a mortal sin, confessed. So he's not forgiven?
Oh yeah, he's absolutely forgiven.
I mean, but the mortal sin.
The mortal sin is still good. The mark is still there.
See, I was taught wrong by the nuns then. Because they said mortal sin was
No, it's forgiven. It's gone. But the mark is still there.
Still have a scar.
You still have a scar. That's right. There's a mark on your soul that has to be cleansed at some point in time.
But there was never penance given for that.
Oh yeah, there was. But you might not have seen it. In modern times, you might not have seen what that penance is. But part of reconciliation, and maybe I should put this up here, but it's another topic that we could probably spend a lot of time on.
Restitution, payback. I feel like a rolling stone to that one.
Yeah, can't get no satisfaction.
It's an entirely different subject, I'm sure.
Part of penance is to look at restitution or satisfaction. So we could delve into the whole theology of why Christ died on the cross. But it has as much to do with reconciliation and restitution as anything that you could ever imagine. Because we could not, as humans, get satisfaction from a sin against God. A total breach in our relationship with God, which is original sin. There was no way we could do it. Because of that, this restorative act or redemptive act of Christ allowed for this whole process to restore ourselves continuously to God through reconciliation.
Is that why they say that with Jesus started the second, what's the name? Because there was a first with God in the Old Testament, and then he instituted the new, I forget.
Covenant.
Covenant.
Yeah. So, what's restitution? Do we get restitution in our penance? So, I remember myself as a kid going and confessing that I had cheated on a test. And Father Livius, who was Italian, but he understood English enough to be able to talk to us Irish kids, told me that as part of my penance, I had to go to the teacher and the person that I copied and tell them what I did. That was part of the penance. And what I was doing was the restorative act. If somebody steals, you're taking away from somebody's livelihood, there has to be an act of restoration or an act of what's the word I use? Restitution. There has to be a restorative act. So part of the penance needs to be part of that restorative act. That can be pretty severe, right? And how do you restore murder? So the penance is incomplete if it can't be restored. That's part of that eternal punishment. If there's not enough restitution, you're going to spend time in purgatory. Even though the sin and the temporal effects of the sin are forgiven, you still have to deal with those things that can't be restored. That's why when we get to purgatory, Benedict XVI says we'll see everybody in the body of Christ that we have affected in some way by our sinfulness.
That's in his book, Eschatology.
Eschatology, absolutely. So you're going to see those that you've hurt through your sinfulness face to face, and you'll have to go through some act of restitution in purgatory. That purgation, that's why we paint purgatory as being almost like hell, right? Because we have to go through some restitution for those things that we could not restore in our lifetime.
Isn't it amazing how our legal system,
It's very much like that,
you have to
absolutely.
pay restitution, you have to go to prison, and you have to face the people who you hurt.
Yeah. But not just the people that you hurt face to face, but what about the children and the grandchildren, the generations to come
Yeah.
that have been affected somehow by what you've done in your lifetime? How do you restore that? You don't even know who they're going to be. But the effects of your sin go through time and space. That's tough. Go ahead.
I know we've addressed this before, but I'm sitting here thinking, there are so many wonderful Protestants out there from all different faiths that I'm sure are going to heaven because they are good people.
Absolutely.
Etc.
They're still going to have to go through this.
Correct, but they don't have to go through all.
They don't have to go through this part of it, but this part of it is going to heal you in this lifetime. Because you're going to get this back immediately. You're not going to suffer through the constant anxiety or guilt that you no longer have a relationship with God. That temporal part of it is gone. there is a relief that comes through forgiveness and reconciliation that is unbelievable. They don't necessarily believe in that, but they're really good people. Yes, they probably are marvelous in their acts of charity and everything else. And all of that is kind of like, how do you say it in the legal profession? Time spent, right?
Time served.
Time served. So they may not, they're still going to have to go through this. They're still going to have to go through judgment. And that judgment comes in two ways. The first is the immediate judgment at the time of your death. And the second one is the final judgment, right? And in between, you need to get cleaned up somehow. And that comes by your face-to-face encounter with the body of Christ in purgatory.
2 years ago, when I was sponsoring an RCIA class, you were giving a lecture one evening, and you said that at the moment of our death, we would face Jesus and say yes or no to him.
Mhm.
I've thought of that frequently. Clarify that, please.
Okay? At the moment of our death, we come face to face with Christ himself. And he's going to ask us the same question that he asked Peter. Do you love me? Okay? That's because Peter denied him. He sinned. He sinned against Jesus in the worst way. He completely denied him. And he says, do you love me?
3 times.
3 times. Because he needed satisfaction for each time he denied Christ, right? Do you love me? At that moment, that is your moment of salvation. And it'll be based on a pattern of your life, through your written history, through the time you're born until the time you die. How do you live your life? Can you embrace Christ at that moment of death and say, yes, you know I do? That happens. That's your salvation. That does not mean that you don't have to go to purgatory.
Right.
It just means that at some point you're going to get to heaven.
That seems like the ultimate punishment. You finally get face to face with Jesus and then poof, there you go.
But you have to understand the instruction, right? The instruction is yeah, you see the glory, you see the beauty, you see the want and the desire and this love,
Wait a little bit
and
longer.
now that's going to be the impetus for you to reconcile yourself to the entire body of Christ. Does that make sense?
Father,
Just a
they,
second.
oh, excuse me.
Go
I
ahead.
remember you saying when we had a class in the morning about that, you said, and then they said, yes, sir, you know I, or yes, Jesus, you know I do. And then he says, well, come here, let me show you what you didn't do and should have done.
We still have
Which is
that
in the
judgment.
Bible.
That's
You
right.
didn't dress when, you didn't give a coat and anything, or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah. When I was hungry, you didn't give me
Right,
something to eat.
right,
Whatever.
right.
Go ahead.
Father David Carter, in a Nicodemus meeting, I don't remember the topic at all, but he stated definitely and affirmatively that eventually we will all go to heaven. We will eventually, everyone will eventually get into heaven regardless, because they will, and some will have quicker than others, but we have to
No.
pay for our sins. But this is what he said, and I said, he said, yeah. And he was very definite
I
that,
think he's saying that everybody that gets
Goes
into
in
purgatory
Goes in
goes to
purgatory.
heaven. There's no trap door out of
he
purgatory.
didn't
That's why we pray for the
differentiate
souls in
between anything.
purgatory.
He said, we will all eventually go to heaven. Now, we will all have to pay, do our penance to satisfy our lifestyle, whatever it was.
I would have to differ with him
What's it?
because the
Me
catechism
too.
actually says there's hell.
But so then what's the point, I mean, I can see, I compare myself with some of the really nasty people in the world and.
So do I.
And my gosh, there's hope for me if Stalin and Hitler can get to heaven, there's hope for me too. Yeah,
The
but,
question still comes at the moment of your death. Will you be able to embrace that question? Do you love me?
What's the point of the final judgment if you know you're going to heaven as soon as you?
The final
I
judgment
think
is
it's
for those that see those that are going on.
But I mean, if you've been to purgatory, you know you're going to heaven, so the final judgment is just like a rubber stamp.
For those that are going to heaven, but
Well,
not
but
for
you already said that
those,
if they were in purgatory, they're going to heaven.
but not for those that are not going to heaven,
Right.
for those that are going to hell.
Okay, I got that. My point was, you said that when you die, you go to purgatory, you have the promise that you're going to heaven.
Mhm.
So what's the point of the final judgment for those people?
The final judgment happens with the resurrection of the body.
That I got.
So as you look at each other, the sin or the holiness is revealed in the physical body of the person, or either have a glorified body for heaven or a not so glorified body for hell. And so it is a revelation to mankind of each one, not necessarily a revelation through the reconciliation of just those.
You're going to explain that one to me at more time when everybody else doesn't have to hear it all. I don't get that one, sorry.
We gotta wind it up, go ahead.
Okay, it's very, you also said at that time that somebody that at the last moment before dying is being on his knees and cut off his head and he says, no, I don't deny Jesus, goes directly to heaven. Yes? No?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
Okay, like for instance, if I die as a martyr
Uh-huh.
for Jesus,
Right.
at the last minute of my life, I said, no, I'm not gonna deny him, I want to see him. I go directly to heaven, I don't have a purgatory time.
That's true.
Okay.
Martyrs go to heaven, that's a nonstop.
Wow.
Okay, let's call it a night, or a day. Feels like night. I hope it was useful for you.
oh yeah, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
That was-
Prayer, Tim, close the prayer.
Yeah, let's say a quick one. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Glory be to the Father,
And to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning,